My dad had been planning this weekend for weeks, and I'm not exaggerating. The text messages started coming in mid-spring. What restaurant should we go to? There's a soccer game that weekend. There's a big outdoor event happening because it was a long weekend in Canada. What if we did this? What if we tried that? Oh, he was texting me, and to be honest, it was almost a bit annoying and a bit overwhelming. But he was telling me all the things he wanted to do with Maddie and Wyatt, who were my sons, his grandsons. The boys call him Bubba, and Bubba made a list. He was so excited. And the boys were excited too because they were taking extra days off school. This wasn't just a weekend, it was an extended trip. Time with their grandfather, time doing all the things that Bubba had planned. Soccer, the outdoor event, meals together, just being together. And they really loved their grandpa. So my mom had to be out of town for this particular long weekend, which is why we were going in the first place. My dad's in his late 70s. He's got ongoing health challenges. And, frankly, he can't be on his own for extended periods of time. So the plan was, I take the boys, we go spend time with him, we do all the things he's been planning, and my mom gets back when we're done. And it made sense. And it was important. And I'll tell you, Bubba was genuinely thrilled about it. So we had the car packed, and the boys were ready, and we were doing last-minute cleanup in the apartment, and we would be leaving really, really soon. And then this popped up on my phone. FYI, Dad at ER, angina, short of breath, racing heart, will keep you updated. And just like that, everything changed. Everything we were supposed to do, all those weeks of planning, all that excitement, all of it just erased. Not gradually, like all at once. One message, and the entire next 2 weeks reorganized itself around something I didn't see coming and something that I couldn't control. I'm Sam Kirk, and this is The Last Lift Operator. We got in the car, and the boys knew that Bubba was in the hospital. They knew it was his heart. I told them right away. But what does angina actually mean? Maddie asked before we started driving. Is it a heart attack? I realized at that moment that despite my dad, having had heart trouble for a number of years and having bouts of angina over those years, I didn't actually know what angina was versus a heart attack. So I looked it up and explained it to my boys, especially to Maddie, who's he needs to know things. So then we got in the car, and maybe 5 or 10 minutes into that drive, just as they were settling in and they're getting comfortable and they're reaching for their audiobooks and their other books, and I had to pull them out of it. Guys, I said as I'm driving, I need to talk to you about what's actually happening here. And as I drove, I told them the truth, and not the sanitized version that I thought maybe I should do at first. Instead, I told them the real truth. Bubba isn't having a heart attack right now. Nana says the doctor sounds optimistic, so that's positive. So then I really had to screw up my courage to say the next thing, which is, but I need you to be really honest with you about what's happening here. And I'm not trying to scare you, but I also don't want to lie to you and say that for sure we know that Bubba is going to be okay, because we don't know for sure. And you need to understand that situations like this can either go really well or they can go bad. Yep, that got their attention. I continued. So, boys, I'm choosing to hope and believe that he's going to be okay, but we also need to be ready in case he's not. I think he will be fine, but I can't lie and pretend to you that is a 100% guarantee. They got very quiet. You could feel them sitting with it, contending with the possibility that maybe death was waiting for them on the other end of this drive. I didn't like doing it, but it felt like it was the right thing to do. And here's the thing, they've never lost anyone. Some cats when they were very young, but no one they really knew, no family members, no friends, no one close enough that losing them would change the shape of their world until maybe now. I'm their parent. And I had just introduced them to mortality, not as an abstract concept, as a real possibility they might have to face in those next few days. I didn't know if I was prepared for that. I don't know if they were. You know what? They definitely weren't prepared for that. And I didn't even know if my dad was ready to go, even though he's older now and we've had these scares before. This is not our first rodeo with his heart. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to lie to them about what could happen. Not to protect them from fear. Not to make the drive easier. I was going to tell them the truth. And then we drove. Here's what those almost 2 weeks actually looked like. And it's kind of one of the reasons I'm a little late in getting this episode out like I'd wanted. Thursday to Tuesday. So this is a Thursday that we left, and we were staying until Tuesday. So we get there, and it's 5.5 days in the town, and this is where I grew up, where my parents still live. And it was full of hospital visits, sitting with my dad while the doctors ran tests, trying to keep things normal for the boys while also managing the uncertainty. My mom was still out of town like this whole time, and she was experiencing all of this from a distance. My sister, nearly 2,000 kilometers away, I'm having to give her updates through the phone calls and text messages. She's worried and unable to be there. And I'm trying to hold things together for everyone, for the boys, for my dad, for my mom over the phone, and for my sister over the phone and FaceTime. And then that Tuesday, I brought the boys back home. My mom had returned to town, and we were back to the ferry, back to the island that we live on, back to their mom for school. I had 12 hours to do some tasks I'd been planning for someone, but there had been some miscommunication between them and myself. There were expectations on their side, on mine, and it turned out they didn't line up. Things I thought I'd communicated clearly, things they thought they'd communicated clearly, and yet those things didn't fully line up. And the gap between those two things created real tension and some real hurt. And I'm really sorry about it. And this was not an ideal moment for me for that to happen, but it was happening. And I felt like I'd really let my friends down. And then back out the door, back on the ferry. My mom picked me up on the other side. And just as I'm packing the bags into her car at the ferry terminal, she said, I just got a call from the hospital. They're letting your dad be released. We need to go get him. Okay, so we drove an hour to the hospital, picked him up, and brought him home. And then another 5 days. My dad recovering, the uncertainty still hanging over everything. And none of us knew why this angina attack had even happened. Maybe some doctor's appointments that they would have coming in the coming weeks would help provide answers, but maybe they won't. And in the meantime, I'm just being there, helping with things, meals and errands and shopping and, things parents in their late 70s find harder to do now. Pressure washing a patio for my mom that had gotten completely taken over by moss. Helping my dad with a small building project he'd been wanting to do, but just found he couldn't do alone very well. I was delighted to do those things. But here's what I wasn't doing during any of this. I wasn't building the business I told myself I was going to build. I wasn't testing the conversations I was supposed to be having. I wasn't writing or posting or moving anything forward on my own behalf. I was doing recruiting firm work in between, the contract work that's been kind of keeping me afloat. But the thing that was supposed to be mine, not touched. I just didn't have the bandwidth to do it. I couldn't do it. So there were moments in those 2 weeks where I felt myself pulling toward what I'd call the performative version of getting through it. Just grinding, just doing whatever was in front of me, just managing everyone else's needs without stopping to ask what I actually needed. Moving fast enough that I didn't have to feel the anxiety underneath. Like I've talked in the last several episodes, that's the 9. And that's me sliding into that 6, not the good version of the 6. This is the destabilized one, the anxious one, the one that loses trust in his own judgment. And I just start scanning for what needs to be done next, what might go wrong next, who needs something from me next. And there were other moments, fewer of them, but they were there, where something showed up instead. The conversation in the car with the boys, choosing to tell them the truth instead of the comfortable version. That was different. That was me choosing presence over performance, choosing honesty over temporary yet tenuous harmony. I think that was the integrated version. Like that was the 9, that 9 moving toward 3 with actual conviction underneath it. And I wasn't just going through the motions. Both of those things were happening sometimes within the same hour. So I came back a few days ago, and the first thing I did was the math. What did I miss? How far behind am I? Financial pressure, runway ending, a business I'm supposed to be building, a venture I haven't even been able to name publicly yet because it still just feels too new. And I spent 2 weeks doing everything except moving it forward. And the voice came back really fast. You're behind. You're falling behind. Why aren't you grinding harder? Why did you let this derail you? And underneath that, it was actually the real fear. Am I actually someone people can rely on? If I get pulled sideways this easily, how am I supposed to build something that depends entirely on me showing up consistently? If the owner gets distracted, everything stalls. God, maybe I'm not cut out for this. So that's where I landed when I got home. I was kind of exhausted. I'm really behind, really guilty. I'm feeling really scared, a lot of fear. But then something shifted. And that's kind of what I want to talk about next. So I got home, and within a day or two, I found myself on a webinar, part of a business coaching community I've been part of for a little while. Small group, and it was honest conversations in this webinar. And the facilitator gave us a really simple exercise. He said, name 10 things you want. No bounds, no categories, no time horizon, just 10 things you want. So my first instinct was to make it about business, because then this was a business group. These should be business goals, right? But the exercise didn't say that. It just said 10 things you want. So I wrote. And when I looked at the list, something caught me off guard. 6 of the 10 were really concrete, practical, like things you could hold on to in your hands, a better car, a permanent home for me and my boys, something that's ours, stable, not temporary, enough money saved by the time I'm in my mid-70s that I'm not scrambling, a decent income, security. And then one of them, frankly, was just a vacation, a warm place where I'm not doing math about whether I could afford the restaurant. That would be nice. Those are perfectly reasonable things, right? Things that make sense. And they're things that I want. But 4 of them were different. 4 of them were pretty foundational. I don't want to live in fear anymore. I want to have boldness. I want to truly believe in the value of what I am and what I bring. Not just say I believe it, but actually feel it. I want to know what I want. So I stared at those 4 things for a long time, and then, people were sharing in the group, and, and I shared mine, and I actually said, I noticed the way these were, because those 4 items, 6 of those you could check off a list, but 4 of them, you can't really check off a list. These are just the things that you contend with in life. They're the foundation of what all those other goals could sit on. You can't build the car and the house and the income if you're operating from fear. You can't show up for your clients or for your kids or for your dad in the hospital if you don't actually believe that you have something worth offering. And I realized that those 4 things are the work, not the business plan, not the methodology, not the venture I'm trying to build. Those 4 things are what I'm actually working toward. And anything else, the car, the house, the income, the warm vacation, those come after. Those become because of. And then I realized something else. I just spent 2 weeks away from everything I was supposed to be building, away from the timeline, away from the productivity metrics, away from the venture and the methodology and the social media posts I was supposed to be making. And what was I actually doing? I actually was kind of living out those 4 foundational things. Don't live in fear. I could have said no, I suppose. I don't know if I would have, but I suppose I could have said no. I have a business to build. Mom, sorry, I can't come over and help Dad. I have financial pressure. I have a podcast episode due. I'm already behind. Instead, I went. And I don't think that's living in fear. That's choosing what matters even when it costs you. And being bold. Choosing your dad over a productivity timeline, telling your kids the truth in the car when the comfortable thing would have been to say everything is going to be fine. Those were small acts of boldness, but they were real ones. Know my value. Not measuring my worth by how fast I'm moving and not believing the voice that says I'm a failure because I stepped away. The value I brought those 2 weeks wasn't measurable in deliverables. It was in presence, in showing up, in doing the things that needed doing for people I love. And then finally know what I want. When I mattered, I knew. I didn't have to think about it. I wanted to be with my family. I wanted my boys to see their grandfather. I wanted to be useful to my parents in a way that actually mattered to them. And I knew exactly what I wanted. I just didn't give myself credit for knowing it. So here's the thing I keep coming back to. I've been watching a lot of people navigate disruption lately, not just my own, but people at all different stages of their careers. Some just starting out, some in their 50s, some in their 60s, some who've spent decades getting extraordinarily good at something that the market has now decided it can approximate for $20 a month. And, there's a pattern that I keep seeing. The people who are struggling the most aren't struggling because they lack skills. They're struggling because they lost the thread back to themselves. The work that made them feel on purpose has changed or disappeared, and they don't know who they are without it. They're operating from fear. They're performing confidence they don't feel. They're doing that sixth thing, I guess, scanning for what might go wrong next. They're working harder and harder to look like they have it together. And what they actually need, what I actually need, is, I don't know if it's a better strategy. It's those 4 foundational things, the ones that don't show up on a business plan. It's the ones that sit underneath everything else. So I think that's what I'm trying to build toward. Not a methodology I deliver from a safe, removed position. Something more like, I'm 1 or 2 steps ahead of you on this path. I've been living this. I'm still living this. And I know what it feels like from the inside to be scared and behind. You're wondering if you're cut out for any of it. Are you willing to ask yourself the same questions I've been asking myself? And I think that's the invitation. My dad is home. He's recovering well. We still don't know why it happened. There are doctor's appointments coming that might give us answers, but he's home. He's making meals, which is one of his favorite things to do, and that has been really good to see. I came back from those 2 weeks scared and behind. That part is true. The financial pressure is real. The timeline is real. The anxiety about whether I can actually sustain this, that's real too. But I also came back knowing something I didn't fully know before. When it mattered, I knew what to do. Not because I had a plan, not because I'd figured it all out, but because when the text came through minutes before we were supposed to leave, I didn't hesitate. I just went. And that's the thing I want to hold on to, not as a consolation prize for the lost time, but as actual evidence. Evidence that underneath all that anxiety and the performative grinding and the sixth voice that doesn't trust itself, there's something that knows, something that chooses correctly when the choice actually matters. Still figuring out how to build a business. I'm still figuring out where I'm going to live. I'm still figuring out what comes next. But I'm not figuring out some aspects of who I am. Not anymore. Not after those 2 weeks. And maybe that's the only real progress that actually matters. I'm Sam Kirk. This is The Last Lift Operator. My next episode, if all goes according to plan, I've got some conversations to have, some questions to ask, some people to sit with, and I'm going to tell you what I find out. And if anything in this or earlier episodes has landed for you, if you're navigating something similar or you just want to talk, I'd love to hear from you. You can go to my website, samuelkirk.com. That's my full name, all one word, SAMUELKIRK.com. And you'll find ways to get in touch with me, as well as links to all the episodes. And I have plans for more to come on the site. And the link is in the show notes as well. My thanks goes to so many good people who've been cheerleaders and advisors and so much more. Thanks so many of you over the past few episodes. I'm just so grateful for good people and the tough conversations, the insights, the aha moments that you've given me. Special thanks to the medical staff at Langley Memorial Hospital for taking care of my dad. And thanks to Maddie and Wyatt for sticking out those hard days and being there for their Baba. And thanks to you for watching or listening. I really appreciate it. I'll see you again in 2 weeks.